Good evening, Mila ma'am, and good evening, everyone.
A very good evening, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Vani, and I'm the head of Department of Aerospace at Hex-Star Universe, and I'll be the host of the day today. And I welcome you all on the day 5 of Space Week, and we are honored to have amongst us with Dr. Mila Mitra, who is the co-founder and academic head at STEM and Space. And today the topic of the session would space, and sustainability. We are honored to have you, ma'am, with us. Thank you so much for joining us for today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vani. Thank you, all of you from Hex-Star, for inviting me here today. So, uh, as we know, today is not just today, but this week is World Space Week. So we are all celebrating World Space Week, and Hex-Star has done a great job of, inviting one speaker per day to keep the excitement going. So I am going to talk about the theme of World Space Week, which is space and sustainability. Yeah. So I hope you can see this, Vani.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. So yeah. So again, like I said, this week is World Space Week, and I know some of the people here today, and you are probably aware of World Space Week. But let me tell you in short what this week is celebrated, what purpose it is celebrated for. So it's an international celebration of science and technology. So it's not just us here today, but all around the country, and in fact, all over the world, people are celebrating astronomy and space uh, through the whole week. So not just the concept, it's not just an outreach, but it's also we are celebrating the contribution to the betterment of the human condition. What does that mean? It means that, a lot of times people might ask you a question: why spend so much for space exploration when people here don't have, money to eat? So the answer is that space exploration is not its own bubble. Whatever we do in space, science in space and astronomy exploration does make its way down and directly affect our modern life and modern technology. An example being the internet was invented, it came into being because of astronomy in the first place. Also, things like that we use in our daily lives, like GPS, like remote sensing, these are all due to space and space exploration. So you can see we use it every day in our modern life. So the United Nations Assembly declared in 1999 that October 4th to 10th would be the World Space Week. And why those dates? October 4th was the launch of Sputnik 1, and October 10th was the signing of the Treaty for Peaceful Use of Outer Space. So just to revise, October 4th, the first artificial satellite Sputnik 1 was launched. It was just a small metal ball that weighed just 83 kilos. And basically, it was the smallest satellite that carried a thermometer and two radio transmitters. And that's what it communicated back on Earth. But it's because of this that the whole, so many missions, so many launches, the first man on the moon, the first astronaut in space, everything started due to that. And why October 10th? When the Russian Sputnik was launched, then the US came right after on its heels. But the trigger that time was, is there a Cold War? So there was rivalry between them, and there was a big concern that any satellites going into space should not be spying on you or for military use. So this was a decade after the Sputnik, a treaty was signed for peaceful exploration of space. So, with that, let me come to the theme of this year, which is space sustainability. That's a big term. So, we'll explore some parts of it today. But just like anything else, that we need to be worried about for sustainability, any natural resource like our oceans, like our atmosphere, the time to act is now because we cannot let things get too out of hand. And that's where it may be headed if we don't worry about it. Okay, so let's me talk about the first part of it, which is how satellites improve life. So we all know about it, but let me just revise how satellites have improved our lives. And from there, you will see that we absolutely need satellites in our lives, and we are really at a point where we could not live without them. Okay, so what are satellites? If there are any younger kids in this uh, participating here today, for you, there are two types of satellites. There are the natural satellites. So, satellites are just smaller space objects moving in a loop around a larger object. So, artificial satellites are the ones, the same concept. They're smaller satellites that have to be gravitationally bound to a larger or object in the middle, but they are artificially made and artificially placed in that orbit. Okay, so what do satellites do? Here are the main functionalities: position and navigation, communication, imaging, monitoring, surveying, and science and technology. So let's talk a bit about each of these. So what do they do in what do we mean by navigation and positioning? And in fact, I'd use the word timing to it. So as you all know, even in ancient times, people used the sky for navigation. They used constellations to identify the north, and the pole star is still used to identify north. But nowadays, we have got much more precise than that. We have GPS, geo positioning systems, which can directly directly track not just one vehicle but multiple vehicles. Many cars have satellite navigation. Besides just tracking cars, vehicles, and planes, you can also track endangered wildlife. And yeah, like I said, you can track ships and airplanes. So this is a complete system that lets us know where anything is, and it gives precise location and also precise timing. And timing is an important concept to have a timestamp, because now from where something originates, even a information flow, you have to have the exact timing and the exact location. So besides navigation satellites, there are also communication satellites. These act like mirrors. What does that mean? It's like a reflection. So there's an uplink, and uplink satellite uploads it to a uplink station, uploads it to a satellite, and it's received at a downlink ground station. So there might be one uplink, for example, for a satellite streaming a show. There could be one uplink, but multiple downlinks where we all receive it in our homes or in our communities. So these are communication satellites are used for reliable, secure communications, information flow, internet data and services. Of course, we're all here today because we have the internet, radio broadcasts, and TV broadcasts. So we are very dependent on it. Here are a couple of examples. So when we had physical telephones that we were depending on, then what was the problem? The problem is you have to have a physical infrastructure somewhere, like phone lines, telephone wires. So that meant that remote locations could not be connected. So having satellite connectivity has brought in the fact that even people from remote places can be connected, because we don't need a physical infrastructure. So here's an example. You may not think of it, but when you go to junk food restaurant and try to buy food, you just pay with your card. But how does this work? Even that information is sent to your bank, and your bank has to allow you, and that is how the payment works. Okay, so everything goes through satellite nowadays. Some of it we are not aware of as we live our day-to-day lives. Okay, the third type of satellite functionality is imaging, monitoring, surveying. So such kind of satellites have cameras or other equipment like that can look down on Earth or at the atmosphere and measure the changes. So these satellites are very important. They're used for farming, weather forecasts, monitoring, and natural disasters. So a little bit more about surveying. Of course, we all know that we get the weather forecasts, and if you remember from 5 or 10 years back, the weather forecast was always wrong. But now it is more and more correct. Of course, weather forecasting is a difficult job, but but it is a lot more correct. And why is that? Because there is a lot more data in the survey. And what does weather measure? Weather satellites measure things like temperature, precipitation, clouds, and wind direction. And based on these, their models can forecast what may happen in the next few days or in the next week. Also, not just weather, but climate is monitored. What's the difference between weather and climate? Weather is something that is just local. To local in time means it is for this or maybe sometime this year. But climate is the weather patterns changing over years, over decades. So you can say, so if the ocean coastline is changing, if the water is coming in a lot more or water is receding, if suddenly you say there is no longer any rainfall in Delhi, these kind of things are climate change. So monitoring over decades gives you longer pattern changes. So climate change is you monitor things like gases in our atmosphere, sea level, polar ice caps, and using these, you make climate models. Of course, these are survey satellites. They're also very important. They help us survey and give information. For example, the picture here is of coffee or peanut butter. Now, these use something called palm oil, and some of you might know that palm oil is very important because it's many forests are being cut down to provide this palm oil, and it is a natural resource that may soon disappear. So that might be a big problem because none of us will be able to have coffee anymore, right? So we need to protect these rainforests. So these kind of earth observing satellites look over large areas, and they'll be able to alert you if trees are being cut down illegally. So yeah, it even tells the farmers what are the best places to grow crops, how the is the is the area ready for planting, and so on. So this kind of information, there's a lot of help that farmers are getting nowadays. So lastly, I'll come to science and technology. And science and technology, there's so many satellites now being sent out to observe space, to observe the earth, to observe the sun and moon. So besides that, satellites are also sent to improve technology, such as the cameras, the radar, the how the satellite is going, the material used, the engineering. So it is used to conduct testing in space. So today I won't be talking about faraway satellites. I'm talking because I'm talking about sustainability. I'll be talking more about satellites that orbit Earth. So I've talked about so many different purposes. One of the main things that the Indian system has, ISRO has, is the IRNSS. That's the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. So this is a constellation of 7 satellites, which are mostly geosynchronous. 3 are geostationary and 4 are geosynchronous. And I'll talk a bit more about these terms in a while. So These satellites are also called navigation with Indian constellation, and it also refers to the Indian word navik, which is comes from now, the Hindi word or Sanskrit word, and it means it actually means a navigator or a sailor. So from why did this come into being? Because of course there are navigational satellite systems that every country is free to use, but India wanted some privacy uh, in the region around India, and so that's why they created this system. So this is just a fun imaging of these IRNSS satellites and how their orbits are tilted. Okay, so I've talked a lot now about, or at least I've introduced you briefly to the type of satellites and why they are so essential in our daily lives. You can see we can't live without them. Just our phones, our internet, we are connected through that. We watch Netflix and Amazon Prime every day. We need to know where we are going. We need to know where our car is, where our friend's house is. So all of these require satellite connectivity, and that's why we know satellites are essential. But the problem is of overuse, because every time you send satellites, there are more satellites out there. And what is the way to sustain this? So let's talk about this part of it now. I'll change the talk, or I'll take the talk to how do we sustain it and what problems can satellite overcrowding cause. So the main issues of space sustainability is that we aim to maintain the safety and health of the space environment. So just think of space also as a natural resource like our atmosphere or like our oceans, and they also need to be protected. So space sustainability means you need a balance between the current needs of society without compromising the needs of the future generations. So space is a natural resource, it's vital to our daily life. So space sustainability as a concept focuses on low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit satellites because this is where the maximum overcrowding and problems are. Okay, so these orbits have limited space, they're increasingly crowded with satellites and other space junk. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some type of orbits. First, I'll talk about geostationary orbits. So what are geostationary orbits? This They orbit around the equator of our Earth. As you can see, the red orbit is a geostationary orbit called GEO in short. They orbit around our equator, and so any satellite on this orbit will always they can go they go geostationary is very high. It's at an altitude of 35,000 kilometers, and you go slower, and you can, because you're that high up, you can see a large area. Basically you'll be synchronized with the Earth, and that's why the name. But you go very slow, you go very high, but because you're very high, if you think of it, if your camera is very high up, it can see a larger area of land. So the only a few satellites are needed to cover the whole Earth. So the geostationary orbits are used for telecommunications and weather satellites mostly. Because it's synchronized with Earth, what happens is they try to, which means from a fixed place on Earth, from the satellite, you'll see a fixed place on Earth. So usually they try to survey specific ground stations, and so they are very useful for telecommunication and weather satellites. But like I said, very few satellites will do the job at this height. The next one I'm talking about is low Earth orbit. So low Earth orbit are very close to Earth. They're at 1,000 kilometers uh, around there. So of course there's a band of heights. So at this height, they go very fast, and they make about 16 orbits a day. So they take 90 minutes to make one orbit around Earth, and they make 16 orbits a day. But because they're so close to Earth, they can measure only very thin pathways. If you think of the ground shadow below, then it's very thin pathways, and therefore that's the problem. You need a constellation, or you need many satellites or a constellation of satellites to cover the whole Earth. So that is why LEO has a problem. That I mean, the advantages are that you do not have to have a specific inclination which is equal to the equator. You can have any inclination at that height, so it gives you many possible orbits. But the problem is that because it because it's so close to Earth, you need multiple satellites to cover the whole Earth. And that's why this term even has come in, constellations of satellites, to create a whole net around Earth. So these are mostly imaging satellites. Why imaging? Because the closer you are to Earth, you'll get more accurate and high resolution features. So that's why imaging. And for telecommunication also, but that is where you will need multiple satellites. So then I'll also talk about MEO, which are medium Earth orbits. MEOs are between LEO and GEO. And again, like LEO, there are no fixed inclinations. You can be anywhere. So there are multiple possibilities. So mostly navigation satellites are at MEO. Okay, so again, just so sorry, I had a couple more there that I didn't talk about. I'm not going to talk about, but I just wanted to mention that there are some that are polar orbit that go around the pole. And there are also Lagrange points, which are very far away from Earth, but those are very important because that's a point where a satellite can stay balanced. All the gravitational forces balance out. And I hope you know some satellites that are at L points, that's JWST, James Webb Space Telescope, is at an L point, Lagrangian point, where it stays stable. Okay, so again, just in one picture, this is the LEO. LEO can have multiple inclinations. Uh, it's very close to Earth. Of course, it's 10 times the height of an airplane, but still it's close to Earth. And other advantages to being close to Earth is it's easier to put a satellite into orbit. Your launch vehicle doesn't have to be that powerful. And also, like the ISS, which is also in the low Earth orbit, it's easier to go there, to manage it, to give supplies. So it's easier to go back and forth from LEO. MEO is further, 5,000 to 12,000 kilometers. And at that height, there are mostly navigational satellites. And GEO is very high up. It's at 35,000 height. So, like I said, the problem is that at LEO, you need many more satellites to cover the Earth. So, and also it's easy to go to, also it's easy to manage. From these points of view, there are many more satellites in LEO. So that's where the problem comes. This image on the left is a bar chart. So you can see the top plot, the red dots are, I mean, the red colors are debris, and the green color is active satellites. So what does that mean? There are many satellites that are not even active anymore, but they're still up there. So see how many of debris there are compared to active. But in this chart, I just want to point out, you see how many more satellites there are in low Earth orbit compared to middle Earth orbit and geostationary orbit. So we need to worry most about LEO. So this is it's part of an infographic. It may be hard for you to just take a look, but again, I just want to point out that look at LEO. There are 4,000 operational satellites in space as of May 2021, and many of them are in low Earth orbit. There are of course many in geostationary orbit too, but the number is very less. And high Earth, I haven't talked about high elliptical orbit, but medium Earth orbit and HEO have very less. So why are there more satellites in LEO? I've already pointed out some of the reasons. Okay, so these are the challenges that people worrying about space sustainability have to worry about. So now we've learned that there is something called space junk or space debris. What is that? It's defunct satellites. What does the word defunct mean? Satellites that no longer work. So, when we send satellites to space, they have a finite lifetime because they've been given some fuel, and so most of them, when they go, the plan is that they will go on for 5 years or 10 years. They might go on a bit longer than that, but eventually they end. As some of you might know, our own Mars Observer mission just ended. It went on far beyond its lifetime, but it did end last week. So these are called defunct satellites. They no longer work, they no longer take observations, but they're still sitting out there in space. There are also rocket bodies, rocket parts. There are smaller fragments, so um, because of that, the challenge is that there's orbital crowding. It's like a traffic jam that you have at rush hour. There are too many. Is somebody saying that they want in? Okay, you want to ask questions in Hindi? Yes, definitely. I'll take questions at the end, and you can definitely ask in Hindi. And I have enough people to help me answer that in Hindi. So yeah, please feel welcome at the end. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm giving this talk in English, but I will definitely take questions in Hindi. Okay, so these are the problems. Space junk, because there's so many parts, and sorry, there are not only uh, rocket bodies and defunct satellites, but there are also small fragments like paint chips, small paint parts, and small parts that can't even be measured. So all this cause orbital crowding, and crowding can lead to collisions. There's also a concern, additional concern beyond this, of space security. You want to make sure that there are no satellites spying on another country, and so on. Okay, I'll show you a brief picture of this orbital crowding. See how many satellites there are now. From 1976, I started. Okay, so where does all the space junk come from? We already know there have been so many satellites that have gone, and some are defunct, and some have been exploded, but their parts are still in space. Why is it dangerous? Because at that height, even small paint chips, if they hit you at that speed, can create a lot of damage. So, are we doing anything about it? Let's find out a little more about that. Okay, so if you look at this picture, what is there in space that we are worried about? There are active satellites and there is debris. Okay, so there are about 26,000 debris objects that NASA is monitoring. If you look at this picture, on the left hand side, you see things circled in blue. These are things that are larger in size and they can be monitored. On the right hand side, they're circled in red. They're too small to be monitored, but so them you can only estimate that they are there. So there are so many objects you can see all the way from, if you look from the left hand side coming down, there are discarded rocket stages, defunct satellites, and fragments. So there are live satellites and debris objects, and we always have to worry about the debris objects because even the smallest fragment can cause a problem if can cause a lot of damage to an active satellite. So our main concern is how to protect the active satellites. So here are some scary numbers. We have been sending satellites for over 60 years. We've sent 11,000 satellites. Out of them, there are 100 million objects that are orbiting Earth, and some of them are, so small that we cannot even really do anything about them. Only 3,372 satellites are currently active. So we have to worry about all those other things floating in space. Okay, so again, we have sent 11,000 satellites. In 2020 alone, 1,283 satellites were launched. And we are all so excited when satellites are launched. It's such an achievement for the space program, whether it's the US or Europe or in India. But of course, they are adding to satellite debris. So 3,372 satellites are currently active. So have there been disasters in space? Ever since I was doing this research, now I'm really worried because in my head it looks like there should be something colliding all the time. So there are just a few cases of documented collisions. The first documented collision was in 1996 when a French satellite was struck by rocket parts, again of a French rocket itself, which had been exploded earlier. In 2009, a US commercial satellite called Iridium Satellites actually collided with an inactive Russian communication satellite, and that collision itself created 2,600 pieces. In 2016, an earthcam window was damaged by just a paint flake that hit it. So I just told you the story of, if you look down here in 2009, when there was a collision that itself created 2,600 pieces. Now I'll come here. There's something called Kessler Syndrome, which was discussed by NASA scientist Donald Kessler. What this means is that when there is a collision, then so many pieces are created, which means the probability of hitting more objects increases, and it sets off a chain reaction. So this is the Kessler syndrome, that collisions between high-speed objects in orbit can cause more and more and increase the probability of it hitting more and more fragments. Okay, so how is it going to get worse? It is going to get worse because we still need our satellites, right? And companies still view satellites as something, commercial organizations still view satellites as something that is helping mankind. And of course it is. It is providing broadband, it is providing, connectivity. So as you know, SpaceX has launched the first couple of constellations of Starlink, which is a large number of satellites. You can see in the top image. And many astronomers have objected to it because it affects your view of the night sky. Suddenly you have a train of satellites like that. But it does improve our communications and broadband. So that is where the debate is going to come in. And the Starlink is going to be like a network. So there will be many more coming. Now, Amazon's Project Kuiper has been approved. There will also be satellites all around the world providing broadband. UK similarly has been approved. UK's OneWeb, China's Hongyan, Canada's Telsat. So now it's getting really scary because there are going to be so many satellites uh, going around the low Earth orbit. Okay, so what are the potential solutions? The UNOOSA, as you can see on the right, that stands for United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA, they are really the ones that are taking an initiative on this. So you can go at it two ways. There are technical measures and policy measures. So the technical measures would be how to remove the space debris, how to manage it, and improve the awareness. And the policies would be a data sharing, and all the governments have to agree on how you can put in these policies. So I'll talk a bit about technical solutions that may come up. Okay, so one way is to drag part of the space debris down to the Earth's atmosphere. If they're smaller pieces and they come down to the Earth's atmosphere, then they're just like meteors. They'll be burnt away when by friction when they enter the atmosphere. So in 2018, a satellite called Remove Debris was able to successfully deploy a net around a satellite. So these are the kind of technologies that are being tested. Now, ESA has awarded a contract to a company called ClearSpace, which has been given the target of retrieving a rocket debris of 200 pounds, and this is scheduled for 2025. So it will actually use robotic arms to retrieve it. So let's hope all these kind of things work. However, these methods are only useful for larger pieces of junk. So we still have to, make the policies of limiting the number of satellites, or at least bringing in that awareness. So besides this problem of satellite debris and collisions, there are other ways that satellites can get destroyed. One is, of course, some of you might know about space weather. So if there are solar storms, that's called the Carrington effect, that can actually affect the satellites and damage satellites too. So whenever there's a space weather solar storm, then there are warnings given that there might be problems with the communication satellites. I've already talked about space debris. There's also space sabotage if somebody intentionally damages a satellite. Okay, so now here's just a funny cartoon with which I would like to end this talk. So there's so many satellites in space. What are the ways you can possibly decrease it? Reduce the number of satellites at end of life, which means you try to bring them, uh, you try to either get rid of them or make them smaller pieces and fall back to Earth. So there's a concept called graveyard orbit, which is increase the size of the orbit beyond GEO, so that they're no longer in the LEO space, which is the most crowded. Okay, the third one is the D orbit, which is make it fall to Earth. Okay, so we are all, that is our challenge, how to balance our need for satellites with the need to control them so that we leave, cleaner space for the future generations. Okay, so thank you and keep exploring. So I wanted to conduct a quiz, but so how about I do that? And then yeah, so if any of you would like to contact me, this is my contact address, mila@stemandspace.com. I'm with STEM and Space. If any of you are school students, remember that we do workshops, so follow us on social media. Okay, so I'm going to conduct a fun quiz. Have any of you played Kahoot? So what we'll
Yes, ma'am, we played.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a very short Kahoot just for fun, because part of learning has to be fun. Okay, so let me start it. So how do you do that? What you do is you open up another. So I welcome all of you to do this. Welcome. What do? You open up another browser.
ఫోన్ అడుగు నాకు ఇప్పుడు ఫోన్ కావాలి క్విజ్ రావాలి అడుగు తొందరగా వెళ్ళు
Okay, so please go on mute. Okay, so what you do is go to kahoot.it. So please go to kahoot.it. So let me put it in the chat. I don't know if you've ever played it. I hope the uh, people who are the professors here also play it. That will be fun. So go to kahoot.it, www.kahoot.it. Go on a browser so you can still see what I'm sharing also. And then and then when you go there, you type in a pin. Okay, what's a pin? I've given it on the screen. I hope you can see it. So I'm hoping to see some players soon. You just type in the pin. Okay, so this is just, I'm playing this Kahoot because it's an easy way to revise the questions. It's a fun way. Okay, so I have one person there. So let's see, everybody log in. It's just for fun. It's not that you need to know the questions or answers. Okay, so again, just open up a browser, that's www.kahoot.it, and type in the pin. Okay, so I'll just wait for half a minute more, and then I'll start the game. And remember, this is just for fun. Even if I know the answers, I might be slower than you in clicking it. So there's always the element of the game. It's not a win or lose. Okay, so now I'm going to start it. just so what are the rules? I have very few questions because it's just a fun game. So when I start, you can look at the options on your phone or the wherever you can do it on your phone or you can do it on your browser and just select the answer that you think is correct. Okay, so I'm getting ready to start it. Let's see how we do. Okay, let's start. Okay, so this is a quiz. The very easy questions. What is space junk? Is it food? Is it dead satellites? Is it rocks? Is it asteroids? Okay, so this one everybody got correct. So you all were listening when I was speaking. Okay, so let's see. But yeah, it still depends on how fast you clicked it. So there is still a scoreboard, right? And we can see Tejas is at the top. Okay, so let's see the second one. Choose the wrong option. Satellites provide us with energy, internet, communication, weather forecasting. So let's see how many of you get the right answer. Again, most of you got the right answer. These questions might be a little easier because I did make them for school children. Okay, so let's see. Now, the third question. World Space Week is celebrated starting October 4th to remember the launch of Sputnik, Apollo, Mars Orbiter mission, or Voyager. Again, all of you got it. That's great. Like I said, this is also a revision. So great, Orion, you hit answer streak 3, but I think many of you are there. But now it's depending on how fast you can click on it. Okay, so question 4, what is Starlink? A spaceship, internet technology, communication satellite, satellite constellation. Okay, so let's see who gets there first, or if you can all remember this in the discussion. Okay, this was a little tiny bit more difficult, not much more, but yes, Starlink is the answer. Starlink is a satellite constellation which is being sent by, SpaceX, and it's already the first set of them have already been launched. Okay, now we have again a bit of up and down, and that's the exciting part about Kahoot. Whoever plays, there's always up and down depending on how many questions you answer and how fast you are. Okay, ISS is located at which of these orbits? Geosynchronous, middle Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, or geostationary? Let's see if you remember this one. Okay, so this was, yeah, it gets a little more difficult as we go get to the end. So yes, it is low Earth orbit, and one of the reasons it's low Earth orbit is because we do need people to be able to go to the ISS and service it, and we keep on sending astronauts and bringing them back. So because it's LEO, that it's easy to manage and send and come back. Okay, so again, the scoreboard, it's going up and down. I think that's the last question I have. I only have 6 questions. It's for double points. Okay, so IRNSS of ISRO is this type of satellite: communication, navigation, survey, or scientific? Okay, let's see who remembers this. Okay, that's pretty good. Many of you remember it. And there is a clue to this. The word IRNSS itself, the word N stands for navigation. So, of course, I took it out, but that is normally you would know it because the word N itself is navigation. So, with that, we come to the end of this game. It was just a way to have some fun. And let's see the podium. Okay, so Bunny is third. Let's see with Anvesh is second. Okay, so Yashu is at the top of the podium. So again, remember, I hope you all know that it was just a fun game. It doesn't really measure how much you know. So that was it for this Kahoot. Okay, so with that, I hope you enjoyed that Kahoot, and uh, I hope you enjoyed the talk today, and you got familiar with some of the problems of sustainability and what we can do. It's very difficult. It's not like climate sustainability. It's much more challenging, and scientists are working on space debris. And for any of you who are in college, you remember that do remember that that is a new career path in space that you can always look into, working with satellite debris. So with that, I'll take some questions if anybody has some questions.
Ma'am, good evening. I have a doubt that can we, what do we can say? You, as you said, lower orbitary satellites, upper orbitary satellites. As
Right.
this, can we send our lower orbitary satellites into the near to the other planet's gravitational field and can we destroy them?
Can we use our own satellite? Yeah. Uh, so can we use? So your question might be that can we use our satellites to destroy other satellites? Is that what you mean?
No, ma'am. I mean that every planet has an
Right.
gravitational field. By
Right.
that, can we destroy our satellite by other
Uh,
planets' gravitational field?
we okay. So that's a good suggestion. But yeah, to take a satellite that far off is itself a challenge. Okay, so that's the problem. Uh, Technically you could, but and that is one of the things I showed is that technically you could make it uh, be further out. So maybe you could take it out to other satellites orbital or gravity path, but that itself is technologically would be a challenge, but otherwise it might be a solution. Yeah. So Tushar, you have a question?
यस, कैन आई स्पीक इन हिंदी?
Yeah, please go ahead.
हाँ, वैसे तो मेरा 3 सवाल है। पहला सवाल ये है कि अगर ये सैटेलाइट और ट्रैक करना हो तो किस तरह से कर सकते हैं मोबाइल के अंदर, ऐसा कोई एप्लीकेशन है? दूसरा वही सवाल संबंधित है कि अगर पीसी के अंदर वो ट्रैक करना हो तो कोई ऐसा सॉफ्टवेयर है? अगर सॉफ्टवेयर नहीं तो वेबसाइट है तो उसकी लिंक अगर आप शेयर करेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा, क्योंकि ढेर सारे फेक वेबसाइट भी एक ही नाम से फेक वेबसाइट भी आ जाते हैं और उल्टी-सुल्टी जानकारी आ जाती है। इसीलिए मैं पूछ रहा था। थैंक यू। और एक आखिरी लास्ट सवाल कि आपकी कॉन्टैक्ट आईडी मतलब कि लिंक्डइन या ईमेल आईडी दे सकेंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा। किसी को कोई सवाल होगा तो आपसे डायरेक्टली ईमेल करके वो पूछ पाएगा और गाइडेंस चाहिए तो गाइडेंस भी दे सकेगा। थैंक यू।
हाँ, थैंक यू। आपने ये क्वेश्चन पूछा कि कौन सा सॉफ्टवेयर है या वेबसाइट है जहां से हम ट्रैक कर सकते हैं। तो आई आई ओनली नो वन और टू। दैट्स अ गुड क्वेश्चन। मुझे एक्चुअली पूरा पता नहीं है, बट आईएसएस ट्रैक करने का सैटेलाइट आई मीन सॉफ्टवेयर है। आई जस्ट टेल यू द नेम। Anybody remember the name of that satellite? Heavens in the sky. What is it? Okay, I'll just give you the name. Yeah. अच्छा, एक है spot the station. Okay, I'll put it in the chat. Spot the station है, वहां से ISS ट्रैक कर सकते हैं हम पूरा। So इस टाइप का है। I'll put it in the chat. और स्पॉट द स्टेशन इज वेरी नाइस बिकॉज उससे ना ये भी पता चल जाता है कि आपके ऊपर से आप कहाँ कहाँ पे रहते हो। जैसे मैं दिल्ली में रहती हूँ, तो पता चलता है कि इस वीक में कब दिखेगा आईएसएस हमारे ऊपर। और स्पॉट द स्टेशन में और भी सैटेलाइट्स मिल जाते हैं कि ऊपर से क्या विजिबल है। सो दैट इज वन ऑफ देम। एंड आई हैड गिवन माय आईडी। मैं एंड में फिर से मेरा आईडी शेयर कर दूंगी।
क्या मैं एक और सवाल है कि ये सॉफ्टवेयर है या वेबसाइट है या मोबाइल
ये
एप्लीकेशन है?
वेबसाइट है।
ओके ओके, थैंक यू थैंक यू। मैं
Right.
इसके संबंधित एक और जानकारी शेयर करना चाहता हूँ कि अगर आप गूगल प्ले स्टोर पे जाएंगे मोबाइल के अंदर और उसमें ऑर्बिट ट्रैक करके अगर आप टाइप करें सर्च करेंगे ना, तो उसमें से आपको एक एप्लीकेशन मिलेगी, अभी मेरे ख्याल से पेड हो गई है। उस एप्लीकेशन के माध्यम से अभी जैसे आपने बताया था एक फोटो के अंदर कि लीली ग्रीन बिंदु और सभी सैटेलाइट होते हैं धरती के आसपास वो घूम रहे होते हैं, तो इसी
Right.
तरह से आपको लाइफ के अंदर वो सब कुछ बताएंगे कि कौन सा सैटेलाइट आपके शहर के ऊपर से जा रहा है, स्टारलिंक हो गया वगैरह वगैरह सब कुछ।
ऐसे दो तीन है, मतलब काफी सारे हैं ऐप आजकल, और ये सारे करेक्ट है क्योंकि दे आर एबल टू ट्रैक प्रॉपर्ली। ये करेक्ट, सारे करेक्ट ही है। यू कैन जो
Ma'am, I
दिखते
have a
हैं।
question.
या, गो अहेड।
Ma'am, any error or glitch occurred in these satellites? For example, a New Horizons spacecraft or the spacecraft which are very long distance apart. Then how exactly these errors and glitches remove?
So if they are really far, then it's a big problem because you can't even reach them. If there's a glitch on something like Hubble Space Telescope, which was also close to LEO, which is close to LEO, then you can see that's one reason why LEO is preferable, because people can send missions to correct them. So for Hubble Space Telescope, where the mirror had a problem, then it could be physically corrected by people who could go up to the satellite. So if it's further off with a glitch, either if it's computer controlled, then only it can be fixed. Otherwise, it cannot. So we do lose
So, ma'am,
satellites that way.
yeah, so
Ma'am,
ma'am,
I have
we have to
another
go
doubt.
to International Space
Sorry.
Station, ISS,
Yeah, ISS is
to fix these issue or
yeah, ISS is close, and yeah, ISS is close enough that anything can be fixed. And for Hubble Space Telescope, yeah, mostly it's ISS astronauts that would go up and fix it. Or there would earlier there were space shuttles also that took astronauts to fix.
Can I say something about the question of Tushar?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, sir.
Uh, I have an app named Stellarium. Stellarium is the app and web version also. और
Right.
तुषार ऐप के द्वारा भी और वेब के द्वारा भी हम इसको ट्रैक कर सकते हैं, कोई सा भी सैटेलाइट हो। बहुत अच्छा है, मैं इसको 2 years से यूज कर रहा हूँ। आई हैव बीन यूजिंग दिस ऐप एंड वेब वर्जन since last 2 years.
And have you been using it to see the satellites? Because most of us use it to find out where where night sky
all
objects are, like constellations, comets, meteors, that kind of thing.
all
ISS, I know you can put in, right? You can plug in the some of the satellites also.
all the
Yeah.
satellites covered by this app.
Okay,
And
so I'm going to spell
most
it out. That's Stellarium. There is uh, there's a computer version and a version on the phone. So you can try Stellarium also as the software to track these. Thank you, thank you, sir.
ma'am, which
thank
method
you,
is
thank you.
used exactly
For what?
for tracking these satellites? Like we can track go through with these apps or like
Yeah.
mega boop or what methods or
Uh,
techniques?
so what is the technique to track them? Just basically because we're communicating with the satellite. I mean, we are sending radio waves or something that bounce off the satellite and back. So all the time we know the same way that, so the satellite is always sending a signal back, so we know where it is and where it is moving. So that is there's a constant communication between the satellite and our ground stations. So there are deep space networking that always know where all these satellites are. So yeah, we can tell where they are.
Ma'am, what is the
Yeah, ma'am.
technology
It also
of these
recommended.
days? There are many types of technology names. Okay, then what is the technology name that is tracking our the navigating or tracking the other satellites or the celestial bodies?
uh, so what, just repeat what you're saying.
Ma'am, actually, nowadays there are types of technologies for everything. They mention specific name for every technology.
Yeah,
Like that.
so yeah, so there are different things like radar, or radio waves that bounce off. So these are I'm yeah, there are I'm not going into that level because I'm not a satellite person, but yeah, remote sensing itself is one of the uh, terms, technical terms that you would use.
And ma'am,
Yeah.
some satellites like Kepler telescope and James Webb telescope are leaving our solar system orbit and they are going far
Yeah,
away.
so James,
So
so
how
J,
can we contact with them?
so we can only be in contact with, for example, JWST by the communication. So only the computers can be in touch. So we can only help them navigate and you know we can communicate, get their signals back, but we cannot physically fix anything that goes wrong with JWST. So that is one of the problems that JWST has to include in its planning. Even this, even Mars orbiter mission or the DART that just went. So you have to worry about them because once they are so far away, DART was built, DART that just hit an asteroid to deflect it. It had to have an autonomous system built in where which would kick into effect at some point, and that itself gives the computer much more intelligence to be able to use AI, for example, like it will photograph and know which of the two asteroids it has to hit. So it cannot take help from the computer scientists or scientists on Earth after a certain point. It's whatever is already built into it. So yes, that's it. Once you
Ma'am,
go,
in DART mission,
yeah,
ma'am, as you said, in DART mission, mega boop method or kinetic impactor technique is used. So what
right.
is exactly kinetic impactor technique?
So
Could you explain?
kinetic impactor is like hitting a marble with another marble. So basically, you impart your kinetic energy and momentum to that asteroid. So this dart is very interesting because it's a binary orbit. There was a small uh, asteroid that's going around a bigger asteroid. It's almost like a moon. So basically, this system was chosen because whenever the small asteroid passes in front of the larger asteroid, there's a dimming, the same way that exoplanets are tracked by the transit method. So basically, when the kinetic impactor, which is DART, hit the small asteroid, it gave its kinetic energy to it and moved it slightly out of its orbit to a smaller orbit. So now when you see the dimming, you'll know that the frequency of the dimming is different. And so you can tell that it's worked. So that's the kinetic deflection is just kinetic impactor is just hitting it and moving it out of the way.
Ma'am, another doubt that in today's social media platforms we can hear the planetary sounds, but actually in vacuum does not sound travels. But how the satellites are tracking these type of sounds also?
So these sounds are not really sounds. There are two things to it. One is that you know one is that it's the word is called sonification. So sometimes it just means that it's a spectrum converted into sound. Sometimes what it also means that that planet itself might have an atmosphere, so there is sound inside that atmosphere, but it of course doesn't reach us, like you said. So then you have to see the signals that are there and try to convert that to sound. And based on whatever frequency you're sensing it as, you can convert it to a sound frequency in the same way of high low. So yeah, so it is converted. So it's not really
Ma'am, I have
sensing
a
the sound,
question.
it's converted. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question regarding if any spacecraft is not fixing about the uh,
Some
sorry,
Yeah, you can speak in Hindi also if you want.
planetary. Uh, sorry, I forgot
Okay.
the question.
So if you're saying if any plan, if there is a, you know,
Yeah, antenna. Yeah, if antenna is not fixing towards the planet, for example, any space in any spacecraft, if
right,
antenna is not is away from the planet in
right.
position wise, so how can we fix that?
So yeah, so you again physically you can only fix it if it is close enough that an astronaut can do a spacewalk and get to it, or there can be some mission that fix it. Otherwise, you cannot. And we have lost some satellites that way because we've lost signal and communication for it.
Ma'am, and
It means we have to.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, okay, one of you go ahead.
Okay, ma'am, I'll go ahead. That
Yeah,
we have some satellites that track in our inner atmosphere of our Earth, so like GPS example,
right.
that will show our inner interior Earth, what which place, what is it. Like that, can we send any satellite to Jupiter? Actually, last I heard that, sorry, I researched that there is a satellite which is sent on the Jupiter, and it is blasted in its atmosphere itself. So why can't we see the inner atmosphere in me? I mean, why we can't track the other planet's interior path?
I mean, we have sent satellites to these places. Most of them are flyby satellites, but we have satellites that have orbited these planets, and we have it is possible to track. It just gets harder the further they go, but it is possible to track them because they still do send signals back. So from the signals, we do know where they are. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here that Georgiana is asking. How can the astronaut communicate with the space station if he's at a distance? So astronauts have to have special walkie-talkies or communicators because yeah, otherwise, I mean, they can't shout out. They do have special walkie-talkies through which they can communicate with somebody inside. Okay, Georgiana also asked, how can we protect the astronauts from space radiation? So there's special magnetic shielding, things like that, that have to be built, especially if you went to and try to set up colonies somewhere else, you would have to worry about that. So there are special shieldings that are being looked into. Okay, now Tushar
But
made
when
the
these radiations can, yeah, but when we
yeah.
can
So that is
only
so
protect
base
from radiation which is coming from that is coming from sun, but how can we
from
uh,
cosmic
protect
radiation
from the
also.
cosmic rays?
Yeah, so from cosmic rays you'll have to have a shielding. That's why when you worry about like building habitats on Mars, you'll have to worry about 360 degrees shielding, and that's why you'll have to have like the igloo shaped things that they have, which is a shielding that covers you like a dome. So that is going to be obviously part of the challenge. But in ISS and all, they have some limited magnetic shielding, but that is much closer to Earth. So again, you have to worry about it less.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you, man.
thank you. And any more questions?
Yes, ma'am, we have two more questions left. One is from Yashraj. He asked, ma'am, does India have any plan to remove space junk?
Uh, so yeah, thanks for asking that question. So I don't really know the answer for that. Uh, I'm sure they'll also enter this soon, but I don't know the answer for that. So let me find out, and I will, I'll share. Uh, so again, like I said, I'll share my contact at the end. So hopefully I can share it back with you. I'll try to find out.
I have, ma'am, I have heard about the beacon in the galaxy message, which is going to send in the bulge of galactic center. So when this message will send by NASA? I am
The,
hearing since some months.
yeah, that also, I haven't heard about that. So sorry, I can't answer that question. Sorry about that. We'll look it up. Okay, so Arya asks, how old are Google satellite images? So, Google Earth, actually almost measures it real time and updates it because some of these satellite images are very, very recent. They keep on updating them because they're also used for, tracking uh, things like natural disasters and deforestations and wildfires. So uh, they are they do get renewed very often, like almost at the daily level. Okay, so yeah, somebody else asked again about stellarium. So stellarium, like that you mentioned, and many of us use stellarium. is I think it's payable on the phone, but on the computer you can download it for free. And there are other softwares on the phone uh, for if you just use it for astronomy. There are many other softwares like Sky Map. So there are other things you can use that are also free. Stellarium is very good. It gives you a lot of information, and you can not just information. You can put in macros, like you can program it for a set of steps. So it might be worth paying that one time, but also on the computer it's free. Okay, so
Ma'am,
Arya,
I have
you're
a
saying,
question personally.
yeah,
Yeah. Ma'am, I have a question personally. I want to
right.
go for masters. So should I go with aerospace or astrophysics? Because I am interested in, I have keen interest in extragalactic astronomy. So should I go with
Yes.
aerospace or
So
astrophysics?
probably you should go into astronomy or astrophysics. Yeah. So I don't know. Are you at the college level now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the difference is that astronomy, astrophysics, they study the celestial objects more, whereas aerospace, you might even get into the techniques, which is rocketry, how to design the missions. So it is a different pathway. So you should definitely go in this astronomy, astrophysics side of it. Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm in a
Okay, thank you,
schooling
ma'am.
of 8th class. There are many opportunities to select the younger students for the space. I heard in the social media, does there any platform for the schooling children of 9th class or 8th class to go training for NASA?
Uh, for NASA, no. I mean, in ISRO, there is that, not for you, but there are some programs for school children, like the UVICA, which is for girl children. Uh, See, I'm sure you can be connected to some, either to Hex-Star or to STEM and Space, or we ourselves are in some of the groups that, we can share this information. So you contact any of us, and Shivesh sir was also here earlier, and some of us are in citizen science groups that help school children also. Okay, so
Ma'am, is
yeah,
Yuvika for girls?
yeah, Yuvika is for girls. The name itself means girls.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So yeah, for NASA, it's much more challenging. They do have a NASA internship programs, but usually I believe that internship program is more for people in the US. I mean, eventually later, uh, once you have your master's or PhD, like I do, I was able to enter NASA as a, with their satellite missions. But then you have to be part of their system to be in it. But now there are a lot of opportunities in India. There are many startups. There are ISRO themselves have connected with private organizations more. So there are many opportunities here to start off, definitely. Yeah,
Ma'am, these L-Space
Yuvika
Academy,
is only for Indians. It is pronounced like this. Yeah, yeah,
ma'am, these L-Space Academy programs or these writing programs, which was conducted by NASA indirectly. So
yeah. So
no
they
Indian
do
can
have.
apply for that.
I mean, you do have. There are. You're right. There are competitions like Astronaut for a Day. Uh, there are the designer space station. There are those competitions that you can apply from India, and you can get prizes for that. So definitely you can look into things like that.
Ma'am, can you please share your contact with our
Yeah,
audience
let
so
me
that
share
they
my
can
contact.
connect with
So
you? And
yeah.
and they can ask their further doubts with you.
Yeah, you can.
Uh,
Yeah, maybe we should
so
end soon.
thank you.
So yeah, you
Yes,
can
email
please
ID.
write down my
Link
Yes,
will
email
be
yes,
ID.
yes.
ID.
We
Yeah,
are running out of time.
and I'm
Yes.
sharing my
Ma'am,
WhatsApp ID
LinkedIn
also.
ID.
So yeah, and LinkedIn also, I'm there. Yeah, please
Thank you
contact
so
me
much,
because
ma'am.
there are other people
Uh,
here who can help you also. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your guidance, and thank you so much for giving such an incredible and informative session for this auspicious time for this Space Week. We are really honored to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you so much again for being with us. And ma'am, I request you and the audience to kindly turn on the camera um, to capture this incredible moment for us to remember by. Our audience, can you please turn on your camera?
Yeah, nice seeing all the faces.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much, and happy Space Week to everyone. And please stay tuned for tomorrow's